Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD, pro national physique athlete. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to write a custom bodybuilding split. A split is basically how you divide up each muscle group's training across the week. And choosing a split is going to be one of the first decisions you have to make when coming up with your program. There are a number of popular bodybuilding splits that have already been designed. Each of these, however, has their own pros and cons. And with some intelligent modifications, you can actually fix some of the disadvantages. You'll see me doing this in my videos where pretty much all of my splits are custom splits. I virtually never give you a split that's just out of the box. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to customize your own bodybuilding splits so you can come up with your own custom programs. It will also help you to understand some of the reasoning behind my programming. Now I typically recommend starting off with a base split and working around it. So you'll first have to decide the number of days that you want to train in the week. And this will come down to your volume requirements and your schedule. Typically, I recommend using the least number of days per week that allows you to hit your volume requirements. For beginners, this will typically be about 3 or 4 days per week in the gym. And for more advanced athletes, intermediate and beyond, 4 or 5 days per week will usually be good enough for naturals. Some people may require 6 days per week in the gym if they're on the upper end of normal in terms of how much volume they need. You'll want to think about your schedule and choose something that you'll be able to maintain sustainably. It's not going to be ideal if you try and follow a 6-day program and only end up in the gym 3 or 4 days per week. The next thing you'll want to do is to start with a basic split and then address the weaknesses. If you're trying to come up with a custom split, I think it's easiest if you start with something that's already been made. A pre-made split will have a basic structure that you can work off of, and there are a lot of strategies that you can apply to actually solve some of the problems that they have. And I'll be talking about these later in the video. If you train with higher frequencies, you might want to start off with a full body split as your base split. And you can subtract muscle groups from various days as needed. Now to talk about frequency, first of all, my recommendation is that you start off with at least twice per week frequency for each muscle group. But I do recommend going for higher frequencies off the bat for smaller muscle groups. These include your side delts, biceps, triceps, and calves. You'll also want higher frequencies for muscle groups that need high volumes. I think the main way to think about training frequency for bodybuilding is that it provides a vehicle for more productive volume. If you have a lot of sets to do for one muscle group, say you want to do 20 sets of quads in the week, if you put all of those sets onto one workout, you're going to be really tired by the end of that workout and you won't perform as well. That is, you won't lift as much weight for as many reps. If you can split up that volume across multiple workouts, you'll perform better across the week in total. I recommend not having more than about 8 to 10 sets for one muscle group in any given workout. If you start going above that, then I'd recommend increasing your training frequency. It's important to emphasize here that each muscle group will have different volume requirements, and this is something that you'll have to figure out for yourself. My programs will give you a starting point, but you're going to have to make modifications based on your own needs. You'll see that most cookie cutter splits just have a set frequency for each muscle group, and it's the same across the board. And this is why you need to make changes. Okay, next programming recommendation. I recommend that you build your split around major compound movements. This is just going to be the most efficient way to make sure you get all your main training priorities hit. There are 6 main categories of compound lifts in bodybuilding. First of all, we have squat type movements, which include squat variations, leg presses, hack squats, and single leg variations like lunges. Squats are mainly going to train your quads, but also will hit your glutes and lower back. Next, we have hip hinges, which will include deadlift variations, good mornings, and back extensions. These will mainly train your posterior chain, so your glutes, hamstrings, and lower back. Next, we have horizontal presses, which will mainly include bench press variations, whether those are barbell, dumbbell, or machine. These will train your chest, but also will hit your triceps and front delts. Then we have vertical presses, so any type of overhead press. These will mainly involve your front delts and triceps. We have horizontal pulling movements, so these will mainly involve rows. Barbell rows, dumbbell rows, or any type of row where the line of pull is perpendicular to your upper body. Finally, we have vertical pulling movements, which include chin-ups and lat pull-downs. Your pulling movements are mainly going to involve your back, but also train your biceps secondarily. Okay, next I want to talk about optimizing fatigue distribution. This is going to be key when you want to really fine-tune your bodybuilding split. Fatigue distribution is basically how you spread out your training stress across the week. And I recommend trying to spread out training stress as evenly as possible. This is similar to our argument about frequency. If you put all of your hardest training onto one day and all of your easiest training onto another day, for example, in a bro split when you have one big leg day and then one arm day, you may be so fatigued trying to get through that big leg day that your productivity will fall off at the end of it. If you spread out your training stress a bit more, you'll be able to get more out of each session. First point here, and the easiest one, is to spread out your rest days as evenly as possible. This one's a no-brainer and should be pretty easy to see just in your program. So for example, if you're following a 5-day split, I'd recommend not having 2 rest days back to back. Next, I recommend that you try and spread out sessions training the same muscles as much as possible. So for example, if you have 2 days training the chest, Try and spread those out as much as possible, for example like a Monday, Thursday, or Monday, Friday. Note that this will also include sessions that train the muscle group secondarily. You won't always be able to do this perfectly, especially when frequencies get higher, but do your best. Next, you want to spread out axial fatigue. Axial fatigue is a special type of fatigue produced when you put compressive forces on the spine. Most commonly in bodybuilding, this happens with heavy rows, deadlift, and squat variations. You tend to fatigue your lower back with these movements and generate a disproportionate amount of systemic fatigue, which is the total amount of fatigue that your body accumulates. This won't apply so much to beginners because you just aren't strong enough to lift heavy, but as you're able to move more weight in the gym, you're going to want to spread out these movements more. You'll see in my programs that I typically like to spread out a heavy row variation, heavy squat variation, and heavy deadlift variation as much as possible throughout the week. Now this does depend somewhat on your exercise selection. You will get more axial fatigue from your heavy barbell free weight type variations. A squat, for example, will produce a lot more axial fatigue than a hack squat. Couple more points on optimizing fatigue distribution. I recommend that you try and have even day lengths. This is a rough way to even out the fatigue across different sessions, but I also think it's a good point to just make training more sustainable. Having predictable training day lengths will help fit things into your calendar. And even though you might not be that stressed right now, say you're a student, you want to be prepared for times when things get stressful, say something happens in your life, or you just have more on your plate later down the line. Next, if possible, try and put rest days after your toughest days. If you have a really tough leg day, it would be ideal if you had a rest day come after that. The muscle groups that get trained after that really tough leg workout probably wouldn't get ideal attention. This will just make the most out of your rest days. One of the tools you can use to affect some of the changes that I've been talking about is to move around small muscle groups. These small muscle groups are pretty easy to switch around and can help you even out your day lengths. The side delts, biceps, triceps, calves, abs, and forearms are relatively easy to move around. Note that I've starred biceps and triceps. This is because you should be careful about where these go in relation to your back and chest training. Having sore biceps or triceps could impact your heavy pushing and pulling movements. And we'll talk more about that next. The other muscle groups can basically be put on any day you want. I put abs and forearms in parentheses, and this is because most people don't need to train these muscle groups directly. When moving around your small muscle groups, especially your biceps and triceps, you want to think about this. You want to be training your main compound pulling and pushing movements before your smaller muscle groups. Back training should come before biceps, chest training should come before triceps, and chest training should also come before shoulders. And by shoulders, I largely mean front delts, like heavy overhead pressing. The idea is that you don't want to interfere with your main compound movements. If you train biceps the day before you train your back, you might go into your back training with sore biceps, and since your biceps are used secondarily in pulling movements, you might reduce your performance in your back training. The same goes for triceps before chest or overhead pressing before chest. In general, your main pushing and pulling compound movements are going to be higher priority. This is because chest and back are just bigger muscle groups overall. And these compound movements just give you more bang for your buck overall, since they also train other muscle groups and involve more muscle mass in total. Note that while your pushing and pulling movements do involve your triceps and biceps secondarily, they don't do so to a great enough extent that they will interfere with a bicep or tricep workout the day after. However, they can reduce your training performance if put on the same day. So the classic example of this is push-pull legs, where you have back training coming before bicep training and chest training coming before tricep training. In programs like this, you'll be going into your bicep training where your biceps are already fatigued from your back work. This won't be a big issue if you're training with low volumes, but if you're training with higher volumes, you will reduce your training performance for your small muscle groups. In these cases, you will want to ideally move those small muscle groups off onto other days. I also wanted to touch on prioritizing different muscles. You want to have your priority muscles come after rest days. Basically, you want to train these muscles when you're most fresh, so you'll get the most out of that workout. If you are trying to bring up a certain muscle group and you want to create a split that specializes on that muscle group, then train that muscle group first in the week. If you're just training for general mass, then I recommend starting off your week with your heavier compound movements. If you want to see me rank some popular splits, check out this video where I go through some of the most common 4-day bodybuilding splits, talk about the pros and cons, and give you a ranking. Comment below with your favorite split. Subscribe to the channel and we'll see you next time.